All right, today we are talking about how to build an agency that will last for decades, literally decades, and how you need to reinvent yourself along the way. My guest today is Andrew Eklund. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. You know, every week I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. We've had Netflix and Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, Redfin, Grubhub, lots of more in the archive. So go check out those archives. We've also had many agency leaders, thought leaders, and founders on this show. Carl Smith of Bureau Digital, David C. Baker, Roger Herney off Madison Ave. Go check out those archives. Lots of great episodes. Search for the term agency on my website, smartbusinessrevolution.com, and you can find it there. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. And you can check out our new platform, Podcast Copilot. Go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And a quick shout out to Peter Gerritsen of Tan Worldwide, past guest on my show, who recommended today's guest. Some of our best guests come from recommendations from other guests. Andrew Eklund is the founder of Ciceron. It is a digital agency established in, get this, 1995, one of the first web agencies in the United States. I want to know how you remain motivated, continuing to run the company for all this time. We're going to definitely ask him about that. It's been recognized, the agency has been recognized as one of the fastest growing agencies by AdWeek and other publications. And he also now is really embracing AI. So that's really fascinating, is being at the forefront of first the development of the web, now the development of AI. So we're going to talk about that as well. But Andrew, I always love to start people back in their childhood. And you had a father who was a leader for you, and your brother and you turned out to be entrepreneurs. And that was a bit of an inspiration for you. And you went out, had paper routes, and sold Cutco knives. Tell us about those origins.
Yeah, I think the hustle was always just sort of a part of things. But my dad was much more of an academic hustler, and my brother and I became sort of the more, what should we say, commercial hustlers. But my dad was a political science professor at a small liberal arts college here in Minnesota, and he became chair of that department when he was very young. Then he became the mayor of the city that college was in. And
he
then
definitely knew his political science if he worked his way into becoming mayor.
Yeah, but he was mayor when he was like 29 years old, you
Wow.
know, and from then he got plucked by the governor of the state of Minnesota and was there, and then became a CEO through a relatively quick thing. And he was always involved in older adult care and so forth. And my brother and I just, I guess, grew up just thinking that's what a job is, right? Like a job is that you just go and you are a leader, and those are the things that was around us all the time. But I think that so that's the upside. The downside is, I think, I learned fairly early on that I'm very independent. And I think I was put on probation twice for insubordination in some of my earliest jobs. And so I learned at a very young age that maybe I should try something about being an entrepreneur. And so I started Ciceron when I was 26. And I've got a son who's 26 right now. So puts it all in perspective.
Can you point to something specific with your father that you either observed in him, or an example that he provided, a story or something like that? How did you learn leadership from your father?
That's such a great question. And, I still get a chance to spend a lot of time with my dad. My dad has Parkinson's, and, while he's a slower person now, his mind is just as sharp. And we've been able to really ask him a lot of those questions, even in the last couple of years, because we have our memories. But it's amazing to ask him stories, like that now. They just come forth. And I'll just tell you that I've had a really amazing opportunity to hear many people independent throughout my entire career talk to me about the impact that my dad had on them. And it was always that he was extremely kind and empathetic, and he was a great listener. and he always just would open up his time for anybody. And he didn't have any interest in the trappings of being a CEO or anything like that. I lived a very humble life growing up in a humble house. I remember when my dad got a free company car and he got a Honda Accord, and my brother and I were pissed. Like, come on, go get a fancy car so we can go drive it around when we're in high school, right? And
Yeah.
he had none of the trappings of any of that. And so humility, kindness, empathy, these are all things that I just have always was inspired by and have tried to take with me in my career.
Those are great lessons. How did you end up starting an agency in 1995? And to put things in context, I think I got my first email address in 1994. And, when I first logged onto the web around 1994, it was before even Netscape Navigator. It was, dial up. It was, yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I remember in my college dorm bouncing around in a text-based system. I remember going on Yahoo before going on into Netscape Navigator and having to tab from like different search terms like education and stuff like that. And somehow I remember navigating around it was like organized by country or something. And then I got to Australia, and then I got to the weather, and I got the weather in Australia. And for me, that was the realization, was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be incredible. That one thing, even though it was totally rudimentary and slow. But so you must have seen some potential here.
Yeah, I was really lucky that in my the one job I wasn't called insubordinate. It was a great job, and it gave me an opportunity in the early 90s, like 92 to 95, to be in the Bay Area a lot. And I was involved in an industry that was very, very Apple based. So I would go to the Macworld conferences and Siebold and these publishing conferences. It was in the business of print. And so the magazines and the news and journalism and all that was built into it. And there's a technology layer to that. And I was sort of embedded in that technology layer. And so I got to spend a lot of time out in the San Francisco area in the early 90s. And so I was also we didn't know what that was back then, but I was becoming an online community manager. Now, I started an online forum in 1993 on AOL.
Wow.
There was like 2 days or 2 minutes where AOL was really cool, and we were there for that, right?
Yeah. A little bit longer than that. It was through maybe
exactly.
98 or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And so we got, I became a community man. I started this forum, and then we became a community, an international community of people that would exchange information, and we'd have chats, we'd have document sharing, you could upload.
And was it related to publishing? What was it around? What was the topic?
Yeah, all related to our industry,
Okay.
And it was in the digital pre-press industry. So I'll fast forward. In 1994, I was at a party, a launch party that Adobe threw for Photoshop 3.0. And it was at the Embarcadero. It was a really cool party, and they were showing off the new features of Photoshop 3.0. And there was this one where I don't remember what menu you would drag up to, but it was the controls or something. And you drag down to something that said color separation. So color separation is the pre-press industry. So I watched before my eyes that industry get evaporated by a piece of technology that just appeared out of nowhere as an option for a user, for our customers to just do our work by dragging down a draft.
To do the work of the company that you were working for. So you saw the writing on the wall. You felt like the company you were working for at the time was going to lose its business.
So that was the first time I ever experienced that. Okay, actually, it's the second time, but we won't go into that. I saw it also happen with desktop publishing, and I saw it again in this moment, and then I saw the web, and all of this came together in 95, and I decided I wanted to start an agency. That this is what I wanted to do, and I was deeply intrigued by the efficiencies of all of it. That you didn't have to be able to get between communicator and the listener or the reader. There was now a direct line. There was no more costs associated to do that. Now, anybody could communicate with anybody else. and publish and become a publisher essentially.
Mm,
And that was deeply empowering to me. And
mm.
I just felt I had already been in Marcom and then I was in technology. So this was just the next thing I needed to do. And so that's when we started the agency in 1995.
And what was the vision of who you would serve? What types of clients and what types of clients did you end up getting in the very early
Anybody
days?
that had money.
Okay, as most companies do,
I
yes.
mean, and quite honest, because you were just starting up, the fact of the matter is, what was I selling? I was selling first generation websites. I was convincing
Mm.
companies that they needed to have this thing called a website.
Which not everyone was convinced
No,
of in the beginning, right? So you had a lot
no.
of education you had to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were
Why do I
we
need a website? I've got a fax.
Cicerone was like 4 people for 4 years,
Mm,
right? That's how much demand there was for the work that we did.
not a lot.
And it's like right now, like
Yeah.
there's like a little bit of demand for AI, but there's not like I'm not like hockey sticking right now with
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
It's too much. It's too much bombarding us all these days. And so I bring that up about like drag down menu, watching an entire industry evaporate, because when we think about AI right now and we think about where things are headed, I'm just waiting for Google or the Trade Desk or Meta or anybody else just to add a button any one of these days to any one of our dashboards that says media plan launch.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And it
All
just,
right. I got
yeah,
staff
lay
that
it out.
does all of that right now. And so
Yeah.
that's how we're preparing ourselves. I'm preparing my staff not to be afraid, all these sorts of like, let's lean in, let's be fearless. This is just now it's our turn. We've been
Yeah.
displacing people for 25 years, for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
We've been displacing traditional advertising. We've been displacing television, all this. Now it's our turn. It's happening to us.
Mm.
And so nobody's spared.
Did you realize that right away? When did that realization come for you? For me, it was I think December. What it was a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
December when ChatGPT came out, and I played around with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And I'd played
Yeah.
with previous text-based AIs before, but I always felt like it wasn't there yet.
That was it, right? I was at an event last night, and a good friend of mine and a person I've collaborated for years here in the Twin Cities named Dan Malin. He and his business partner Scott have just this. They're serial entrepreneurs, and they have a technology called Lucy. And we had been working with Lucy for a long time, and I heard him speak last night, and it was really funny. He was saying like, those of us who have been involved in AI for so long are like wondering, why does everybody think it was invented a year ago?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And his answer is that OpenAI essentially launched out to the public and it went to 100 million users within
In
like
like 2
48
weeks.
hours or something
Yeah, right.
crazy.
Yeah,
And that's what it was, right?
yeah,
Now everybody knew what it was. It wasn't, companies like Lucy having to go out and pitch AI. It was just all of a sudden there. And that was really the catalyst. And so for me, I just, we've been involved in machine learning, a precursor or the same as
yeah.
AI. We don't exactly
Right,
know the difference, right?
right.
But
And
for
there's
a long,
parallels to the development of the internet because the internet captured the public's imagination maybe starting in 95, 96. It started getting more front page news, but internet had been developed, I think, in the 78 or something like that. It
right,
was when
yeah,
it started, DARPA.
way back even before then, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And the web was, around since 93. It just didn't have a browser, or
yeah,
91, 92, sorry. And then the browser, it didn't have a
right.
browser. And so
Yeah,
it had Gopher and all this kind of stuff, which by the way has Minnesota roots, which is why it's called a Gopher.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's what happens, right? The internet took 5 to 10 years to really, and we just flipped traditional budgets like 2 years ago
To digital,
to digital.
in part because of the pandemic, of course.
Yeah, the pandemic and
Yeah.
just the fact that if you look at what do people do, what do humans do every day, it's just the data is there that says this is where they are. That's
Yeah.
all
So
it is.
prior to that, companies were spending the majority of their money not on digital advertising, but on traditional media, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
In taking you back still to the 90s, you said there were 4 people, you were 4 people for the first few years. Was there a point where you realized you were starting to gain traction?
Yeah, I think what happened was a bunch of different things. When we were able to launch a web editor so that anybody who's non-technical could start to update their websites.
And this is revolutionary because
Yeah.
WordPress started to come around, I think 2003,
Yep.
so many years later, and really didn't take off for a number of years after that.
That's right. So I think there were a convergence of two things at one time. One was just the ability now to really provide the communicators with the tools to communicate without having to go through developers and writing code, writing HTML or whatever we were writing back then. Cold Fusion. I think that was one of our first sort of markup language. And so that was one thing. And then pre Google AdWords, there were some other search marketing engines. One was called GoTo, and then Overture, and one went to Google and Urchin, excuse me, and then one went to Yahoo. But we were using those keyword buying programs, 2 years before Google AdWords came out. So all of a sudden, we could provide this level of sort of financial accountability, which really was the first pivot for us to becoming a digital marketing agency, right? Pretty soon, a lot of the stuff that we were involved in, the web development side sort of went off into the enterprise, right? Went off and sort of like found a home in IT.
Mm-hmm.
And then the digital marketing people remained connected to the marketing folks and the consumer side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, the trajectory I wanted to be on. It was really strange. We did get up to like 30 people, I think, in 2000, 35. And I think about it back now, or, now it's really interesting. We were a Microsoft shop. I mean, half of my staff were, .NET developers and writing active server pages. People don't even know what that is anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were a Microsoft certified shop, and I realized that was not my passion. I mean, I really I love developers, and I especially love them these days. But I didn't want to get sucked into the IT area. I wanted to stay consumer focused. I mean, I was a music major and a philosophy major. I mean, I'm not heading in the math direction, right?
Yeah.
Heading into the engineering side of the world. So,
And so you said this was in 2000, of course,
yeah,
2000, 2001, 9/11 happens, big
yeah.
downturn. A lot of agencies had to lay off. Did you have to do a bunch of layoffs around that time period?
Oh yeah, about 50%.
Wow. What was
Yeah.
that like?
And again, I sort of needed to use that as a catalyst, right? And so it was right at that time where I knew we had to do that financially. That's when we made the hard pivot, really sort of away from development and start to work with other development agencies who made that choice in their life. And we were going to choose to go this way. And then by that time, we were certified in Google AdWords and email marketing. The guys from ExactTarget who started ExactTarget, which became Salesforce Marketing Cloud, I subleased them office space.
Mm.
So I had like a front row seat to email marketing in like 2002 and 2003 because they were in our offices.
Mm-hmm.
We were working with. They were friends of mine, and so we just got front row seats to Google AdWords. We got front row seats to ExactTarget. And so for us to make a pivot, we already had great technology partners, and it just allowed us to sort of be chicharrones, right? And the word means a trusted guide. It's like, okay, now we're going this, and we're going to pull people with us into that new direction. And we really remained that way until, well, all of the 2000s. And then by 2015, we had really layered in programmatic and being much more data driven in audience and how we were doing what we now call audience design. Audience design for us came out of the AI stuff over the past year, but really we've been doing audience design for a decade at least. So
you mentioned all these different technologies that you were developing in-house, which you didn't spin off into something else. Maybe coulda, woulda, shoulda, could have become the next WordPress, could have become Google Analytics, could have become an email marketing platform. Is there any part of you that regrets that you didn't do that?
Look, you can look at it and say coulda, woulda, shoulda, but you have to finish the sentence, right? I coulda, woulda, shoulda been able to start a software company that has IT help desk and has to figure out subscription models and has to figure out how to manage development cycles and product feature cycles and all this kind of stuff. You know what? That's not me, right?
Whole
That's
different
just
set of
not me. I don't
challenges.
know how
Yeah.
to scale that business.
Yeah.
Good ideas around those businesses. I think I still have a future in that. Like I still think we're spinning up products right now that I think this time around, I think I'll look at it very differently. And it might just be that we're in things like GPT stores and other places and other marketplaces where these tools might maybe get accessed or utilized through or have APIs built into, and there's some sort of interesting payment system on the backside whereby I scale simply by usage, but and that's how it works. Like I can do that.
Yeah.
Right. I think I can do that. I haven't done it
Yeah.
yet, but I think I can do that. Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the tools of starting a business now, including being able to code, have essentially is a race to zero right now. And so I think anybody with a good idea can pretty much start to think about having the ability to execute software relatively quickly. And that'll be a
How,
big change from the old days.
how was the 2008 Great Recession downturn? How did that affect you compared to the 9/11 .com burst?
Well, 9/11 was so hard because it was so emotional. And I was a young parent at the time. And you spent a lot of time wondering what world your kids are going to grow up into. At that time, we didn't know if we were heading into World War III. I mean, and then not only that, but then, right after that, the Iraq War was already fraught with so much problematic decisions. So now not only was it hurting the business, and then we had a geopolitical thing, which a lot of us were looking at it just going, this is no, we bombed the wrong country.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so now all of a sudden you had the stress of that. And so, you know, 2008 was different because that was like a macroeconomic failure of a system that we had nothing to do with.
Yeah,
And it
but
was
still
like
you're
a failure
suffering
of the
the
banking system. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, but still so many companies are suffering the consequences of it.
No
Fair or
question.
unfair, yeah.
But no question. And the thing that I think is the really big misjustice. Well, there was misjustice after 9/11, went to the war in the wrong country. And then there was misjustice done in 2008 and 2009. And that is that very few, if anybody, suffered any consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Like no, there was no justice I don't think anybody did any
Right.
prison.
No one went to jail. Yeah, people talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it hurt us bad. I mean, we
Yeah.
went once again, I think we went down to 6 people
Wow.
in 2009. I
So
remember.
at this point, where you're 14 years into the business, you've got maybe one or two kids at this point. 14 years into the business, you made a couple of pivots, and this global macroeconomic crisis comes through, and you go down to 6 employees. If you can recall, what was your headspace like at that point in time?
Here we go again.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about 2008 and 2000. I mean, I remember it, but like I believe that I had been through it before. And so I sort of knew what to do, knew what I had to do. I tried to use empathy, right? One of the things I think we've always done well is I think we've really helped people find jobs right away. Like we've
Mm,
opened up our networks and we try and make like, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it, but here are some people for you to talk to. And I just had coffee this morning with somebody who I had to let go a little bit later than that. And we had coffee this morning and we're
mm,
networking and I'm helping her find a new job, and yeah, I mean, so I think that was a big piece of it. And so like the COVID and then going through COVID, then I hate to say it. I mean, I really don't want to sound like just a jaded vet, but like, I kind of know what I need to do. Like with AI, like I kind of
yeah.
know
Well,
what
that was
to
going to
do.
be my next question was, with COVID comes along, not to flash forward 11 years later, but after 2009, I think a lot of companies, especially companies that have been in business for a while, as you had in the case when COVID came along in 2020, a lot of companies acted a lot quicker that time because they realized that they hadn't acted quick enough during previous crises.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of different things during COVID. COVID was a difficult time because it was a false sense of reality all over the place. We were bolstered by the PPP loans, which we're immensely grateful for. They were forgiven. It allowed us to continue to employ the people that we did, even if the market couldn't bear it.
Hmm.
We did our best. Obviously we made a ton of pivots, right? Um, but I think we were a very, very tight knit group of people before COVID. And then when we were all scattered about, it was getting very, very, to keep the same level of service levels. And we're very human in our interactions with our clients because we're always talking about new things they haven't heard about. We try not to use the new language of whatever the new thing is, but it creeps into our language. And so, being able to be face to face and very human. And so they can see in our face that we're not trying to like act smart, or we're not trying to, or certainly not trying to make them feel dumb. It's just that we're sort of living a little bit in the future, and sometimes the language changes,
Yeah.
right? So when we didn't have that during COVID anymore, it became really difficult to make the strong sorts of things. And then, and let's be honest, clients were also extremely under extreme pressures. We had lots of healthcare clients. They were running hospitals during COVID, right?
Yeah.
So
Very
colleagues were
stressful.
getting
Yeah.
sick and dying.
Yeah.
So it was just a heightened level of everything. And then when sort of COVID was quote unquote over, we just had to dust off and say, well, what are we now?
Hmm.
Right? Like I bought a building during COVID and renovated it, and for an excitement for everybody to come back.
Mm.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays,
Mm.
right? And I'm okay with that. It means I have 3 other days of the week that I can fill with small teams. And we're going to be doing a little co-working space now because everyone loves this building. It's become already a little bit iconic in a way, but
Hmm.
everyone says they're looking for conference space. They can't find conference rooms. And I've got more
Mm.
conference rooms and they're all beautiful,
Mm.
and
So
so that's a pivot,
you convert it,
right? It's
yeah,
just
pivot
like,
it to something else. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, was your team was totally in person before COVID?
100%.
So what was that transition like for your team then in the early days of COVID, having to shift everything, were you like buying laptops and firing up Slack for the first time? What was that like?
Yeah. So I think the things that there were there were so many things. First of all, the team at that time was quite tight, and they really did pull through together really well. But my co-pilot in the agency right now is a woman named Carrie Helling, and she's also just been a dear friend of mine for most of my adult life. And we resisted working with each other for decades. And she came on a few years before COVID, and she's just an extremely empathetic, very human, um, great listener person. And so she went from doing what she had been doing to really sort of being like chief of staff, chief of culture, chief of staff, ensuring that people had what they needed, that we were figuring out how to communicate better, that she would drive hundreds of miles along with our office manager at the time and deliver like beautiful blankets to people, right? Like cozy blankets,
Hmm.
right? Or booze, or or whatever
Or
it
both.
was, you know?
Blanket
Yeah,
and booze. That pretty much
blanket and
wraps
booze.
up
What more do you need, right?
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all you
Or
need.
whatever, she did so much of those kinds of things, and so did so many other people. I don't want to just say that she did everything, but she, that became a really big thing. Like, how do we survive this? How do we
Hmm.
not become a new level of stress? And so what the PPP loans did was essentially allowed us to live a little as stress free as was possible. The problem is that all of that ran out, right? And the economy still wasn't back again, and we're still trying to figure out how to work. And then AI comes along. And so I've used this sort of post-COVID moment to say, well, first of all, I just fundamentally believe that the technology itself is transformative and disruptive all at once. I know it. I've studied it. I put my 10,000 hours in,
Hmm.
and I don't have clairvoyance. I can't tell you the future, but I've seen the future many times, and it is all following the same trajectory, right? The adoption curves, the hype cycles that they get high and then they'll crash. Like the AI cycle will crash. It's going to crash next year, right? And then there's going to be
Like
4 or
people,
5
when you
companies.
say that, you mean like people? What do you mean? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I hate to, I don't think it's a false equivalency, okay? But like if you take the crypto market, right? And if
Sure.
you look
Yeah.
at the crypto market that happened during the pandemic,
Yeah. Had a lot of
10,000
excitement around
coins,
it. Yeah.
10,000 coins would
Right.
be launched because it was no problem. And all these NFT projects and all these that kind of stuff. And, the people who are paying attention were saying 99% of this is going away.
Yeah.
Why do we say that? Because we did .com in
Yeah.
99.
Yeah.
And 99, we all knew 99% of that was going to go away. But what came out of that? Amazon, Google, right? Like that.
And some of those were just too early. Like the web
Yeah.
vans of the world were too early, and the technology was too raw and too, rudimentary.
And we had terrible bandwidth. We didn't have bandwidth to work
True.
with.
Yeah. With dial up.
You do it on dial up.
Yeah. Yeah. So the experience wasn't there. So
Yeah.
now I love your enthusiasm and your excitement after 30 years of running the same company.
Yeah.
You still have the same enthusiasm and excitement, and it's contagious, and you're excited about the future.
I'm so excited about the future. And I'll tell you very specifically why. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in a modern technological world that we live in that humans don't like doing, period. It's busy work. It's not productive. It doesn't challenge your intellect terribly much. It's just the busy labor that we do. And a lot of our time goes to that, a lot more than we think, actually. We're not even aware of the
We don't
amount
even
of
realize
time.
it, right? Yeah, I liken it to like the elevator operator. Like when we had early elevators, there's a guy in the elevator stood there all day long to do a crank, right, and close the door. And we thought that was just normal until we realized that now we don't need to have someone like that.
Right. Yeah. And there's so much stuff that we do every day. And I know this because I'll say, hey, let's find some time to let's find a half day where we can just sit in a room and like brainstorm this thing out. And like getting those meetings on the calendar are hard. It's like, because there's not enough time for it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, if we don't have time for that, then what is occupying our time? Right. And then when you really look at that, you start to say, well, we do push a lot of things around.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not like people are not doing their jobs. That's just part of the jobs to get it done.
Yeah.
So I look at all of that, and I look at what's happening with AI, and I look at specifically around what's going to happen around AI agents, which are essentially can take a command from a human voice saying, I need to set up a campaign for Acme Company. Please use segment 68, 32, and 46, because I know what those are, right? And I want you to launch it based upon the optimizations of last month. And while you're at it, if you could find me 2 new audience segments who look like the most highest performing segments out of this campaign, go and do a smart contract to figure out how we can access that data. And you're literally telling it to do that. And while you're having the meeting, it will go and start doing that for you. Because it knows what you're asking for. It's learned your language, it's learned your processes, it's learned how to do things.
Yeah.
And what does that do? Well, it allows the people who work at Ciceron here to invest almost all of their time into the intellectual higher pursuits of what are we actually trying to do here, which is, like in the case of our healthcare clients, to save lives, right? In our entertainment clients is to introduce new music to consumers who would love to know that music exists, right? In the e-commerce business, it's just simply putting a product that we know you're going to like. Make sure that you have the opportunity to see that. And it does it empathetically, because I'm not going to give you that product if you're not going to buy it. Because I'm also empathetic to my client's budget, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's this empathy exchange if you look at advertising differently. And AI, in order for us to be empathetic, we need to get all the busy work out of the way so that we have more time to think about what humans are trying to do. And so I'm trying to take Ciceron up to a level of mind share, mind power, because we can automate the things that are underneath it. And frankly, take away labor from my existing employees, that's not gratifying labor anyways.
Yeah.
I get to take away the things they don't like about their jobs.
I have two questions related to that. First, I want to know what it was like when you had this epiphany that AI is going to revolutionize, change everything for us, and you went back to the team and said, we need to do a full-on pivot. Was the team like, oh, well, there he goes again? Or were they in agreement, or were they like, oh, absolutely not? What was that reaction like?
Well, so there was a very specific event. I was working with a client, still a client of ours, very good client. And I realized that this ChatGPT 3.5 had just come out, right? You had mentioned it earlier. I think it was, just November 22. And so I was immediately playing with it and everything else. I was trying to figure out use cases and just playing around with it. And I was in a meeting in Denver at the client offices, and I was listening to a lot of salespeople talk. And the director of sales, leader of the sales group, was there, and VPs were there, and they were talking about the customers, like who are the people that they should be going after. And it was kind of like that, the overused analogy of, like, if you put a blindfold on and put 6 people in a room with a hand on an elephant in different places, they're going to describe it to you completely different. I think that what happened was that they all had a different understanding of what was happening with the customer. They couldn't really hone in. It all depends upon all the different conversations that they had, and they weren't honing in on anything. And what I realized was that I could take this, at that point, very rudimentary. They had been entering notes from all of their calls that they had had. Not all of them, some of them, and some were great note takers and some were really terrible note takers. But they were going into Salesforce and they were taking notes after all of these calls. Sat down with the couple, they're in their 70s, they have, such and such plot of land, these are their aspirations. They have grandchildren that they love, all the different things, right? And they didn't respond well to when we brought this up. They did respond well when we went that, all that kind of stuff. So I took all that information and I put it into the very early LLMs, and I basically instructed it and prompted it a lot more than just asking a couple of questions. Tell me about these phone calls, and are they breaking into any cohorts of customer segments? And it magically sort of took all of that conversational data and turned it into 4 new personas based upon actual conversations from actual people. And then when I shared that with the client, and I told them what I was doing, I said, I'm just trying things here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'm even charging you for it. So let's just figure that. I shared them with them. They're like, that makes sense. And what did it do for us? It made sense. 2, we were able to go and actually map out the kinds of content and the language that we would need and the type of creative. I was then able to take that and turn it into data by saying, these are personas. Now I'm going to match that up against data sets that we have available to us that look like those people. And now I can take that and activate and market with creative using the language that the people have expressed. So that was like the early test. And as soon as we launched those new segments, we had a 300% increase in sales qualified leads and SQLs, not MQLs. And I knew right there and then, this is what we're doing. And so now we've taken that up to a much higher level of sophistication, where we're having sales organizations and customer service teams record all of their conversations. And then they don't have to take notes. So we catch everything and then do voice to text. And then conversational data becomes what feeds into the LLM, which then starts to do much deeper level of segmentation, which then we are going into the market for audience data. We are going into the market with a currency that's very strong. Our clients going into market with a strong currency. That is all because of a little teeny experimental test that happened like 16 months ago. And now it's a product that we call audience design. It's much more scaled and it's much more interesting and it's much deeper. And the LLMs are just so much smarter and faster now.
And so back to the team, how you explained this to your team that we need to make this pivot. Was that the, kind of the realization? How do you explain? How did they react? I brought them
on the journey, right? I brought them on the journey. I didn't do it really in a black box. I mean, I did go off and experiment some stuff, and then I brought it in and I said, here's what I'm working on. And at staff meeting, I would show them what I was doing. And I would ask them, help me improve this. Like, what the hell do I know? Right? I'm no smarter than you. All I did was open the application and start using it. Like, how many times in your career do you get to do that?
Yeah.
Like, do something, and then after
It's the
doing it
excitement of
quite a few
discovery.
times, yeah, you're kind of an expert.
How do you think about the team that you need in the future and how you hire for the new team that you don't even know really what it's going to look like? Like, how do you hire people now for this new iteration of the company?
That is going to change dramatically. But the tools and our maturity in this aren't there yet. But in the future, I'm just going to want the smartest people I can possibly find within the verticals that we work, that have the very best subject matter expertise, who, assisted by this great technology, and maybe, like, for example, I think I know I'm going to need more data scientists. I'm going to need more. I probably am going to need some Python developers. Like, right now, I don't need them on staff. I know who they are, and I can call them up and we can collaborate on a project. But now, as we operationalize this sort of thing, I'll probably want them to do sort of the finishing work, right? Customization, weird data, all that kind of stuff. For whatever reason, the AI can't process it. Although I think that's becoming increasingly uncertain. I think what I need to do right now is I think I need to stay exactly the same size that I am with my amazing team. And I think we need to backfill talent with technology. So I'm going to take the staff that I have, we're elevating, and we're going to fill in with technology. And these people that are amazing already are just going to be more amazinger. And we'll have more time to do that. And we're going to grow together as a new agency. And that's terribly exciting.
I love the positivity, and I want to wrap all this up, which has been great, with my last question, which is, I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those who've helped you along the way, especially peers, contemporaries, others that you've known for a while, maybe. Who would you want to thank?
Well, a couple of things. Gratitude is a really important thing to me. I think I even showed you, I have a tattoo of a symbol of gratitude on my arm.
That is so cool.
Yes. And so I appreciate you asking that question, because, I'm so grateful to the people who have stuck by me during a lot of this. I'm very grateful to the team that I have right now, because they've already been through a lot of change. But even larger than that is, I just have an incredible peer network of other agency owners. You mentioned Peter Garrettson earlier. I'm a member of the TAN network, and which is an independent network of agency owners just like us. And we spend, a couple times a year we're together, and much more than that in Slack, and just having a peer network of other agency owners who are not competitive, who have been there before, who know how to steer you. They're my inspiration. We've been together in best of times and worst of times. And I don't have an advisory board. I've never had one. It's stupid. That's one thing I'd do different. I should do it. I should still do it now. But it's almost like they're my advisory board too, right? So, and then I have a bunch of competitors of mine who are here in the Twin Cities. And we've known each other forever. We grew up together, and we compete, and then we can go out and have and they're just the nicest people. And I just have amazing people who lead agencies here in town, and we stay close and we support each other during good times and bad. Some of us are exactly the same, and some of us are very different, and we get to collaborate, because there's nothing like running an agency. I really believe that. Just easy. At the very beginning, we're the first budgets to go when times are bad, and the last to come back when things are when things are getting good. So we only have little windows to be awesome.
Yeah, that's right. Andrew, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and Ciceron?
Great. Thank you. Well, ciceron.com, ciceron.com. Do follow us on LinkedIn too. And I put it out on LinkedIn. Follow myself. I publish a lot. I've just used that now as my sort of network, because I have quite a large network there. To try and port that over to Patreon or something else like that, it just sounds like too much work. And so LinkedIn, you find myself, Andrew Eklund, or the Ciceron blog, and yeah.
Great. Andrew, thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.